gleich nur als Imposant.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Afghanistan is descending into chaos. Today, the Taliban captured the capital of a province. It's a huge setback to the government. Experts say it's only a matter of time before the government falls too. The Americans couldn't be bothered less. They left the Bagram military base in the dead of night, reportedly without even informing the Afghans. The weapons and Humvees they left behind are falling into the hands of the terrorists. Afghan troops are surrendering. Afghan civilians are leaving. And the country that spent 20 years and $1,000 billion to turn Afghanistan into its war laboratory is in the middle of a botched-up withdrawal now. What happens next is a security challenge not just for Afghanistan but for the entire region, including India. New Delhi has been in talks with all sides, including reportedly with the Taliban. External Affairs Minister S. Shankar landed in Tehran today. He's headed to Moscow next. What does India expect from Iran and Russia? What is India's game plan? How does it propose to safeguard its interests in Afghanistan? On Gravitas tonight, we'll bring you a detailed report on the biggest developing international story. Also on the show, days after a drone attack in Jammu and an incident at the Indian High Commission in Islamabad, Pakistan looks to buy Turkish armed drones. We'll get you a special report. Jamaica wants reparations from Queen Elizabeth for Britain's slave trade. Forget compensation, London doesn't even offer an apology for slavery. Why is China banning the country's tallest skyscrapers? Because, like their economy and their exports, their buildings too are showing cracks. And a tribute to Dilip Kumar, the legendary actor, dies at the age of 98. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Top minister resign ahead of Indian Prime Minister Modi's cabinet reshuffle, including Ravi Shankar Prasad, who held the portfolio of information technology, and Prakash Javadekar, Minister for Environment. Health Minister Harshwathan also resigns before 43 new ministers were sworn in what is a younger, more diverse cabinet. World leaders call for calm in Haiti after the shocking assassination of President Jovenel Moïse, who was shot dead by unidentified armed men in his home. His wife, Martine, was also wounded in the attack, said Interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph. The UN atomic watchdog says that Iran has begun the process of producing enriched uranium metal, which could help the nation develop a nuclear weapon. European powers say the move jeopardizes talks to revive the 2015 nuclear pact. The US calls the move an unforgettable step backwards. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization says that North Korea could face a harsh, lean period next month given its food shortage of around 860,000 tons this year. North Korea has been crippled by international sanctions over its nuclear program and is struggling to feed its population. In a bid to enforce greater punishment for sexual assault crimes, Spain approves a law to define all non-consensual sex as rape. The law is a departure from the current legalization where the accused must have used physical violence or intimidation for the assault to be classified as rape. The world's richest man got richer after the Pentagon announced it was canceling a cloud computing contract with Microsoft, sending rival Amazon's shares rallying. The rally raised Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' fortunes, with his net worth hitting a record $211 billion. A European study finds that wearing a mask can expose children to dangerous levels of carbon dioxide in just 3 minutes. The finding is a cause of alarm as authorities insist on masks for kids as a prerequisite for schools to reopen across the world. Amid rising gun violence across U.S. cities, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo commits $139 million to tackle the surge in violence in the state. Cuomo declares a gun violence state of emergency, allowing officials to gather resources to tackle the shootings. Argentina have set up a dream final against arch-rivals Brazil at the Copa America after beating Colombia on penalties. Argentina took an early lead when captain Lionel Messi set up Lautaro Martinez, but Colombia grew into the game and equalized in the second half through Luis Diaz. The match went straight to penalties at the end of regulation time, and Argentina keeper Emiliano Martinez saved thrice to send his side through to the final for the 29th time in the tournament's history. The Phoenix Suns have drawn first blood in the NBA Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks with a 118-105 point victory. The in-form Chris Paul was the star of the show despite the surprise return of Bucks talisman Giannis Antetokounmpo. The 11th All-Star grabbed a game-high 32 points on his final debut, while his part in Phoenix on Thursday.
The situation in Afghanistan is worse by the day. The Taliban has been waging a war against the Afghan forces. It has gained control. It dealt another blow to the government. For the first time, a provincial capital has fallen to the Taliban. These are pictures from Kalaino, the capital city of the northwest Badghis province. Terrorists from the Taliban are on bikes. Some of them are on the streets with guns. That's how the Taliban declared its arrival. In recent weeks, they had surrounded the city by capturing nearby districts. Today's move is significant. By controlling this provincial capital, the Taliban now controls the entire province of Badghis. As the terrorists entered the city today, the governor of the province sent out a text message to reporters. It said, "The enemy has entered the city, all the districts have fallen, the fighting has started inside the city." And the pictures corroborate his version. There was chaos on the streets today. These images are believed to be from the city's central prison. Reports say more than 200 prisoners broke free here. We're told that the fighting between government forces and the Taliban is still on. The Taliban were seen inside the police headquarters of the city. Later in the day, the governor of the province appeared before the press. He was carrying a gun himself and wearing what looks like a bulletproof jacket. The governor then assured that government forces are still fighting back.
As I speak to you, we are in the capital city of the Badghis province. Part of our security leadership is here. I want to assure you that our security and defense forces, including special units and special forces, are defending the city. The enemy that is currently fighting us, they have suffered casualties in some parts of the city and have also been defeated. My last word is to keep your composure for now, and I promise you that we will all defend the city, God willing.
The man you saw was the governor of this province. That's how bad the situation in Afghanistan is. Even elected officials have been forced to pick up a gun. 1/3 of Afghanistan is now controlled by the Taliban. The civilian government is on the edge. Experts say its fall is only a matter of time. A civil war is being predicted in Afghanistan. In recent weeks, the Taliban has tried to make gains in northern Afghanistan. This province, the province of Badghis, falls in the same region. Several districts in the north are of strategic significance. They run along Afghanistan's border with Central Asia. And controlling these districts means controlling the borders, controlling the checkpoints, the trade routes. Last month, the Taliban took control of Imam Sahib. It's a town in the Kunduz province, and it's right opposite Uzbekistan. This capture gave the terrorists control of a key trade route. Now, the Taliban is building on these gains. On the other hand, Afghan forces are surrendering, handing over their weapons to the Taliban. Civilians are fleeing from their homes. Even foreign diplomats are leaving. Consulates are being shut as governments across the world feel their staff are not safe in Afghanistan anymore. In Mazar-e-Sharif, for example, which is the capital of the Balkh province, Turkey and Russia have closed their consulates. Their diplomats have left the city. The Balkh province has seen some fighting in the recent past. India too has a consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif, but New Delhi has no plans to shut it down just yet, or for that matter, any other diplomatic outpost in Afghanistan. But India too has cut down its operations at these consulates. Similarly, the consulates of Iran, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Pakistan have cut back on their activities. So what is the Afghan government doing? It plans to launch a major counter-offensive and take back some of the lost districts. Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has issued a statement. He has said that the Taliban cannot make the Afghan government surrender, even in the next 100 years. That's what he said. At least 10,000 Afghan commando forces are now pitched against the Taliban, but they're already on the back foot. As the Americans leave, the Taliban are brazenly asserting themselves. They are in no mood to share power. They feel no need to negotiate anymore. They've reverted to their old language, the language of violence. As I said, the Taliban does not want to share power. It wants to grab power. It doesn't believe in democracy or peace. There's little to suggest that they have changed. If anything, they've become bolder thanks to America's botched-up withdrawal. The US military has pulled out more than 90% of its soldiers and equipment. The Afghan forces they trained for 2 decades are proving to be no match for the terrorists. And the weapons that were supposed to protect Afghanistan are falling into the hands of the Taliban. The crisis is dire, and a lot of it is of America's making. Our next report tells you how the United States has left Afghanistan to its fate.
It couldn't have been more humiliating for Afghanistan. Government forces are collapsing. They are surrendering their military gear to the Taliban, giving up weapons and bases without a fight. Humvees left behind by the American military for the Afghan forces are now in the hands of the Taliban. The terrorist group is now showing off its latest acquisitions on its propaganda channels. In contrast, the Afghan forces look helpless, left to fend for themselves after being abandoned by the American military. The troop pullout began on the 1st of May. Since then, the Taliban has ramped up its offensive and taken control of more than 100 districts. There's nothing stopping them. The US military is leaving from its bases quietly. Last week, the Americans cleared out of the Bagram air base in the dead of the night without informing the Afghanistan government. Why? The US military is now worried about its own security. So it's not sharing when and how its soldiers will leave. The new commander of the Bagram base told WION how the Americans exited.
We had an initial plan in coordinate with him regarding deployment and taking security out of Bagram, which we completed on Thursday night. But when the Friday morning, when we heard about that the U.S. troop left the Bagram, we were not aware about that. And I think this is because of the safe departure. I think they didn't inform us for their safety, and they took their safety or security measurement.
After turning Afghanistan into a war laboratory, the Americans are leaving quietly. Even President Biden doesn't want to discuss the withdrawal. Ahead of the 4th of July celebrations, Joe Biden evaded questions on Afghanistan.
I want to talk about happy things, man.
Afghanistan.
I'm not going to answer any more questions on Afghanistan. Look, it's 4th of July.
The US president didn't have a lot to say in that press conference because America doesn't have much to show for the 20 years it spent in Afghanistan. Death, devastation, and a country torn by war, tottering when faced with the Taliban. General Austin Miller, the commander of the US forces in Afghanistan, believes the country is now on the path to civil war. He says this situation should concern the world. Afghan forces are not up to the task. 20 years of American training hasn't helped them. In the battleground, they have suffered heavy casualties. Now soldiers are surrendering. Last month, a Taliban commander was seen handing out cash to Afghan soldiers, $60 in local currency for each soldier to go home. This is what the Americans have achieved after having spent $1,000 billion in their so-called war on terror. They've delivered another failed state. The hasty retreat is only making matters worse. It's as if overnight the US has decided Afghanistan isn't their problem anymore. They certainly helped creating it, and the problem won't solve itself. In the rush to end its longest war, the United States has pushed Afghanistan into another war. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
America can wash its hands of Afghanistan, but its neighbors cannot, and they should not, because this is a regional security threat. It puts all the neighboring countries in a dire situation, especially India. So what is India doing to ensure that all is not lost, that the gains of the past 2 decades are not reversed? India is engaging with all stakeholders. After 2 visits to Qatar last month, India's External Affairs Minister S. Shankar has now gone to Iran and Russia. The idea is to work with a broad alliance on Afghanistan, because India has a lot at stake. India's investment in Afghanistan has been financial, diplomatic and cultural. The rise of the Taliban does not augur well for India. It puts India's projects and people at risk. It upends regional dynamics, giving Pakistan and China an upper hand in Afghanistan. And it casts a shadow of terror on Kashmir. So with this reality in mind, New Delhi is trying to secure its interests. Today, Foreign Minister S. Shankar left for Russia via Iran. Why these 2 countries? We'll begin with Iran. The resurgence of the Taliban is bad news for Iran. It poses threats to Iran's political, economic, security and strategic interests. Geography is critical here. Iran and Afghanistan share a 1,000-kilometer-long border. The Taliban's rise means an influx of refugees to Iran. 3 million Afghan refugees already live in Iran, and there's every indication that Tehran is not ready to accommodate more. The second problem is sectarian. You see, Iran is a Shia country. The Taliban follows Sunni Wahhabism. A Taliban-dominated Afghanistan could become a launch pad for anti-Iran and anti-Shia activities. 20% of Afghanistan's population is Shia. This includes the Hazaras, who were massacred in large numbers the last time the Taliban was in power. So for Iran, which considers itself the guardian of Shia Muslims, countering the Taliban is a moral obligation. And the third reason has to do with business. Iran is Afghanistan's largest trading partner. Bilateral trade exceeded $2 billion in 2018. A stable Afghanistan is essential to maintaining this economic influence. So Iran is as worried about the Taliban's rise as India is. You could say it all boils down to securing one's own interests. But the fact is that on the issue of Afghanistan, the views of Iran and India converge. On your screen are images of Indian Foreign Minister S. Shankar meeting the Iranian Minister Javad Zarif. Shankar also met with the new Iranian President Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi. The focus of both the meetings was the Taliban's growing influence. But the question is, how exactly can Iran help India? Well, we can think of two ways. First, through intelligence and information sharing. In 2018, India and Iran agreed to share intelligence and fight instability and terrorism in the region. We say now is the time to walk the talk. The Iranian establishment wields considerable influence over some sections of the Taliban. It is said to have permeated the Taliban's military brass. It can help India through information sharing to safeguard the interests of both sides. Iran can also help India in talking with the Taliban. It's already in contact with the Taliban's political leadership sitting in Qatar. And just 5 months back, in January this year, senior leaders of the Taliban traveled to Tehran to share their views on the US-brokered peace negotiation. So Iran can help India when it comes to facilitating the terms of discussion. Then we come to Russia. The foreign minister will leave for Moscow on Thursday. He will hold a bilateral with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. Again, the Taliban challenge tops the agenda. Yesterday, we told you how Russia operates one of its largest military bases right next to Afghanistan, the Russian 201st military base in Dushanbe in Tajikistan. Moscow has been conducting military exercises here to prepare for any future escalation by the Taliban. The Kremlin also said that it is willing to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan, both directly and through a regional security bloc. And today the Kremlin has said that it sees India as an important player in formulating such a coordinated response. So the bottom line is this: Afghanistan is going through a churn. The Taliban wants to control the situation completely. It wants total control. Some countries like India and Iran are working to prevent that. They're pushing for a broader power coalition. Others like Pakistan are working to make the situation worse. It would be safe to say that no side wants a rerun of the 1990s. India has repositioned its priorities, but the progress it makes will depend on how far other stakeholders are willing to go. The other, older security worry for India remains Pakistan. It is taking to drones now. It is looking to buy armed drones. So what does Pakistan do? Warm up to Turkey, its so-called brother country. The commander of the Turkish land forces was recently conferred with the most prestigious military award in Pakistan, the Nishan-e-Imtiaz. This is being seen as an enhancement of defense ties between the two countries. Reports also say that Islamabad and Ankara are planning to exchange drone technology, and they're going to work on joint defense projects. Plus, they'll be collaborating in Afghanistan along with China. How exactly? Our next report tells you.
This is General Umid Dündar, the commander of the Turkish land forces,
the award of Nishane-e-Imtiaz military
and the latest recipient of the Nishane-e-Imtiaz. It's the most prestigious military award in Pakistan, an equivalent of the US Presidential Medal of Freedom. The award was conferred upon General Dündar on his recent visit to Islamabad, where he also met Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa. This was no customary visit. It signals the enhancing of bilateral ties between Pakistan and Turkey on all levels. According to a statement by the Pakistani military, matters of mutual and professional interest with special emphasis on defense and security collaboration between the two brotherly countries were the agenda of the visit. Brotherly countries, they say, hoping to be comrades in arms. Reports indicate the biggest expansion of ties will be in the field of defense. This includes procurement of drones, military collaboration in Afghanistan, and joint defense projects. Pakistan is increasingly relying on drone warfare to open a new front in Kashmir. In the last 2 weeks, there have been 3 separate incidents involving drones. 2 along the border and 1 at the Indian High Commission in Islamabad. Now reports indicate that Islamabad is going to procure armed Turkish drones like the Bayraktar TB2, which helped Azerbaijan defeat Armenia in the November 2020 war. The second area of collaboration is going to be Afghanistan. With the pullout of Western forces, Turkey will be taking over the Kabul airport. But the Taliban views Turkey as a NATO member and not a fellow Muslim country. This is where Pakistan should come handy, with the influence it wields on various factions of the Taliban. Turkey is also looking to establish an axis with China and Pakistan to expand its influence after the withdrawal of US troops. The third area of collaboration is going to be joint defense projects. For months, reports have been circulating how Turkey is pushing to co-manufacture fighter jets with Pakistan. This primarily includes the TFX program, which Turkey once called the first big fighter jet of the Muslims. It is looking at Muslim countries like Indonesia, Kazakhstan and Pakistan to be potential partners or buyers of these fighter jets. The growing closeness should be a matter of concern for India, especially when it comes to Kashmir. Ankara has a history of backing Islamabad's actions in the valley and supporting it at international platforms. Now, as it looks to expand military cooperation with Islamabad, how could Kashmir not feature in its plan? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
What goes around comes around, sometimes in the form of a frisbee, sometimes as a haunting nightmare, and sometimes in the form of a long, long bill. The Queen of Britain will soon receive one. It will be from Jamaica. The Caribbean country is asking the British Queen to cough up billions. What for? As reparations for slavery. Quick background. Jamaica was a British colony from 1655 to 1962. The colonizer introduced sugarcane cultivation in Jamaica, and to support it, Britain introduced slaves. People were stolen from their homes and forced to work in the field. Many were shipped across to other countries as part of the transatlantic slave trade. In 1662, there were 400 slaves in Jamaica. By 1734, the number became 86,000. Between 1702 and 1749, nearly 300,000 slaves were imported to Jamaica. More than 100,000 were exported. It was only in the year 1807 that the British Parliament abolished slave trade, and it abolished slavery in 1837. By then, Britain had abducted and enslaved at least 12.5 million people. 12.5 million people enslaved. Many of them were Jamaicans. In 1833, Britain paid off 46,000 British slave owners. They were given £20 million, almost 40% of that time's annual budget. What was this money for? To compensate for the quote-unquote loss of human property. What about these human properties themselves? What did the government give them? Forget compensation. Did Imperial Britain even offer an apology to the slaves and their families? The legacy of the slave trade still stings Jamaica. The country has been asking for justice for some time now. In 2015, then British Prime Minister David Cameron visited Jamaica. Jamaican leaders asked his government to pay reparations. Cameron was told to atone for the historical sin. the Prime Minister refused to even offer an apology. Here's what he said instead. David Cameron told Jamaica to move on. Reports published around that time revealed why he may have been so anti-reparation. Turns out one of Cameron's own family members was among many slave owners to have received compensation for loss of slaves. Jamaica did not give up its fight for justice, though. The Culture Minister recently said, and I'm quoting, "We are especially pleased to announce that we have made further steps in our strides towards seeking reparatory justice for the victims and descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. The petition is being presented to the Queen of the UK and or the government of the UK." Now, we don't know how much Jamaica is asking for exactly, but here's what we can tell you. Britain has a history of denying reparation. In 2014, a coalition of 15 Caribbean countries presented a compensation plan to the UK. They wanted reparation for slave trade. A YouGov survey at that time found that 46% of the respondents in the UK opposed reparations. What about the government? The Foreign and Commonwealth Office said reparations are, quote-unquote, not the answer for the legacy of slave trade. May I then ask, what is? What's the answer for the legacy of slave trade? After the Second World War, Germany was made to compensate for the damages. In the years since, several companies have had to cough up money for oil spills, for nuclear power plant leaks, for gas leaks, for accidents. And here we are talking about millions of people being abducted and enslaved, but Britain refuses to atone for its inhumanity. And FYI, reparations for transatlantic slave trade could add up to $14 trillion. Of course, the UK refuses to pay. Just like it refuses to return stolen goods, be it India's Kohinoor or Ethiopia's manuscripts. Treasures from British colonies decorate the crown and its properties today. They hang on the walls of its museums and palaces, and the UK sees nothing wrong with any of this. It feels no shame or the moral obligation to at least be apologetic, to at least apologize for its historic plunders. Today, Jamaica is setting a trend. It is asking for compensation for historical wrongs. Compensation it is entitled to. Compensation that 54 Commonwealth nations are also entitled to. The Great Britain ruled them all, looted them all. You see, the British Empire was the largest the world has ever seen. It ruled over parts of Africa, Asia, America, Australia, and New Zealand. It squeezed all of them. From Africa, it abducted, trafficked, and enslaved people. Stole Benin bronzes. From Greece, it stole Elgin marbles. From Ethiopia, manuscripts. And from India, it drained $45 trillion. It is time for reparation. And while the world comes together to make China pay, it must not forget to also demand accountability from the British Crown. And speaking of China, it no longer likes skyscrapers. In 2019, the Chinese built the most number of tall buildings in the world, but now they want to ban them. Why? Last month, a skyscraper in Shenzhen began to shake. The incident triggered concerns over the quality of these projects. It looks like China is finally realizing the true worth of made in China. Here's a report.
The Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the Taipei 101 in Taiwan, the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, and the Willis Tower in Chicago, United States. These four structures are among the tallest in the world. Also, they don't shake when the wind blows. Like this skyscraper in Shenzhen. It's one of the tallest buildings in China and just outside the list of the top 100 tallest buildings in the world. Last month, it suddenly began to shake. There was panic. Shoppers inside the building scrambled for safety. In the days that followed, the skyscraper wobbled again, shaking the confidence of not just its occupants, but also its makers. The company that owns the building had to ban people from entering. What caused the shake? There was no earthquake, just the good old Made in China tag. That should be enough to explain malfunction or breakdown. Chinese netizens are already at it, blaming substandard construction. One of them wrote this: "No one in their right mind would agree to work in that building again." In response, the government shook its head. Faulty construction wasn't a problem, it said. But the denial stood on shaky ground, because soon after, the government decided to ban all skyscrapers. No more buildings taller than 500 meters. That's the new rule in China. Local authorities have been asked to limit the height of skyscrapers to 250 meters. What explains this rule? Poor quality and poor oversight, both leading to safety hazards. Did officials not know about this in the past? Of course they did. Experts have repeatedly raised concerns about China's approach to construction. A model that chooses speed over durability. In the last decade, skyscrapers popped up all over China. Right now, out of the 10 tallest buildings in the world, 5 are in China. Building towers at breakneck speed has been a matter of pride for Beijing. Not anymore. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
British trade unions are up in arms. They want their government to suspend trade deal negotiations, not entirely, but with a handful of countries. Why? Because of alleged abuse of workers. It's difficult to ignore the self-righteousness here. I know Karl Marx talked about workers' as movement being global, but these unions are taking it to another level. These are some of the countries on their list: Colombia, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Turkey, and of course, in typical British fashion, India. Now, this list does not have any legal effect, but the judgment itself is problematic. Since Brexit, the UK has signed trade deals with 67 countries. It is negotiating with 24 others. Among these countries are India, Brazil, and Malaysia. The unions say that these countries have poor working conditions. So what do they propose? Suspend the deals and negotiations and use this as leverage. Leverage to do what? To force these countries to change their labour laws. Well, we have two questions here. Why do British unions get to decide this? And how does India feature on this list? It all comes down to politics. These unions have the backing of the UK's Labour Party. This is what the Shadow Trade Secretary had to say. The government is handing out trade deals to dozens of governments with the worst track records in the world for abusing and exploiting their workers and actively launching negotiations with several more. You see, self-righteousness is a dangerous drug, and the Labour Party has always loved it. Former Labour leader Harold Wilson called the party a moral crusade. His words were, "The Labour Party is a moral crusade or it is nothing." But this is not a moral crusade. It is a targeted smear campaign, one that crosses borders, ideology and sovereignty. We have global watchdogs to uphold labour rights. They present reports. They offer recommendations. Some countries accept them, some don't. But at least it's a fair process, not the personal opinion of political parties. And it's rich coming from Britain. Until a few days back, the UK was waging a sausage war. Fishermen threatened to block the British island of Jersey. Why? Because they were being denied the right to fish. Where was the moral crusade then? The fact is, Labour is struggling. The workers are not voting for the Workers' Party. I'll give you an example. The GMB is one of the largest unions in Britain. It has more than 600,000 members. Traditionally, they support the Labour Party, but now there is no such certainty. The GMB's leader says there will be no more blank checks to Labour, no more funding, no more support. They say Labour is drifting away from people, not connected with real-world experiences. Even from thousands of miles away, this assessment sounds spot on. This week, we told you about the Labour's by-election posters in West Yorkshire. Strangely, it had Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India on it. Seems like the party is running out of domestic issues. Their voters are deserting them, so trade unions are their last straw. Labour is doing everything it can to support them. You can call it a last-ditch effort. How is the British government reacting to this? Well, they've been accused of ignoring labour rights, of signing deals at the cost of human rights. This is how a Trade Department spokesperson reacted. None of the continuity trade agreements we have signed and which have been scrutinized by Parliament, have eroded any domestic standards in relation to workers' rights. So the government is satisfied. What's more, these deals have been scrutinized by the Parliament. Was Labour absent from these meetings, or did they choose to ignore them? The UK is not the only country, by the way, trying to sign a deal with India. There are existing deals with ASEAN, Japan, Malaysia, and also Mercosur, the South American trading bloc. Talks are underway for a massive deal with the European Union. The fact is, free trade deals are highly beneficial. They generate billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. So this attempt to club India with the likes of Zimbabwe and Egypt is unwarranted. It is yet another overreach into India's sovereignty, and the Labour Party of Britain is making a habit of it. Wars have been fought over water, for land, the death of an archduke. It's the 21st century, and tensions have sparked between two countries over sparkling wine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared that in Russia, only Russian wine can be called champagne. On hearing this, French producers from the region of Champagne have become fizzing mad. There's talk of banning champagne exports to Russia altogether, but is that even feasible? Our next report finds out.
Did you know wines are named after regions? Bordeaux is actually a region in France. The wine is named after Pinot Noir, or Semillon, plucked from Bordeaux. Same is the case with Soave in Italy, Sherry in Spain, and Champagne in France. The grapes used in making champagne grow in Champagne. Wrong, says Russian President Vladimir Putin. He says, quote, only Russian wine is champagne. The admirer of Russian vodka has taken a sudden interest in wine. Putin has signed a rather absurd law. The new Russian law allows only local wine producers to call their drink champansko, the Russian for champagne. All imported wine bottles are required to be labeled as sparkling wine. Even the bubbly coming in from Champagne will not be allowed to call itself champagne. Now you know why we call the law absurd. Goes without saying, the rule has been designed to promote local wine. But what about France's heritage and pride? The sparkling wine law was signed on the 2nd of July. It sparked tension over the weekend. France's champagne maker Moet Hennessy suspended deliveries to Russia for a while, but only after shipping some crates with the label sparkling wine pasted on the bottles. Overall, French producers are in a fizz. Suspending exports to Russia is not an option. Numbers will tell you why. France produces nearly 231 million bottles of champagne each year. The country makes nearly $2.9 billion by exporting bubblies. While the UK and the US are France's biggest champagne customers, Russia too imports a sizable amount. How much, you ask? Russia imports around 50 million liters of sparkling wine every year. French champagne makes for 13% of this. Moet Hennessy alone makes 2%. That's quite a lot of business. No wonder when the markets opened this week, LVMH shares were down 0.2%, while shares of Russian sparkling winemaker Abrau Durso were up over 3%. While the LVMH group has resumed wine exports to Russia, it's not all happy hours in France yet. France's agriculture minister said that only champagne vineyards can use the name. Experts say the champagne name is protected in over 120 countries. Now, try telling that to Vladimir Putin. Bureau Report. WION World is One.
And here is the biggest news story from India. There's been a major revamp in the Indian cabinet. It's been called the most significant reshuffle under Prime Minister Modi. He's been in power since 2014. And this evening, 43 ministers were sworn in at the President's house. The list includes several new entrants, also existing ministers who've been reassigned. The four big ministries, that is Finance, Foreign Affairs, Home and Defence, will not see any change for now. They've not been touched. But four other major ministries, Health, Environment and Information, and IT, of course, are in the news, Information Technology. These are some high-profile resignations, both in terms of the individuals involved and also in terms of the headlines that their ministries have made of late. So we'll talk about the resignations first. At least 12 union ministers have resigned from the council. The notable ones are Information and Technology Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, the biggest headliner today, some would say, in India. He has resigned from both the portfolios. Ravi Shankar taking on big tech over compliance. The war with Twitter is still on. Some of these cases are in courts. Prasad had been vocal about making Silicon Valley giants fall in line in India. But the confrontation has only intensified in the past few weeks. So his departure holds a lot of significance as the government of India is still in the process of enforcing the new IT rules. What impact will this shake-up have on the process and who will replace him? We're waiting to find out. Next on the list is Union Health Minister Dr. Harshwathan. He too has stepped down, and this too is extremely significant. Remember, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. India has just emerged from a devastating second wave. The exit is perhaps a message to the ministry and to the man involved that the pandemic could have been managed better. Then we have the Information and Broadcasting Minister Prakash Javadekar, who was also the Environment Minister of India. His exit, many say, is surprising because Javadekar was also the spokesperson for the government. And then we have Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal. He has resigned citing health reasons. But the resignation could also be over the confusion on the postponement of various national and state level exams in the country. In the last 18 months or so, a lot of exams have been postponed, and there has been a fair bit of confusion on how these processes should be managed with the lockdowns in place and with COVID restrictions in place. So all 12 resignations for the moment have been accepted by the President. There's also news about who the new entrants will be. The prominent names in the list of new faces in the cabinet include this man, Jyotiraditya Scindia, a Congress leader who switched to the BJP some time back. He's also the representative of the state of Madhya Pradesh. He has been in the government in the past under the UPA government, and this is his first entry in the government in the BJP. Then we have Kiran Rijiju, already the Minister of Sports and Youth Affairs. He's got a cabinet berth. Anurag Thakur, who is a serving Minister of State for Finance and Corporate Affairs. He's got a cabinet berth. Sarbananda Sonowal, who has served as the Chief Minister of Assam, coming fresh from the victory in the assembly elections there. This is where he has been reinstated in the Union Cabinet. And then we have Hardeep Singh Puri, the Housing and Civil Aviation Minister of India. Again, these are just a few of the major names from a list of 43. It's a massive cabinet revamp, the biggest reshuffle since 2014. The inductions are being seen as an exercise to make the cabinet younger and more diverse. Also as an exercise to secure victory in a crucial assembly poll scheduled for next year. Another headline from India, and this, I'm afraid, is not good news. The country has lost its superstar, Dilip Kumar. The legendary actor died at the age of 98. He was called the tragedy king of Hindi cinema. Dilip Kumar was born in 1922 in Peshawar. This was before India's partition. His name was Yusuf Khan.